Now that you've found UBN Radio and discovered our quality talk shows, it's time to spread the word to friends, family, and the universe. 24 hours of music and talk. Radio without limits. That's why people keep coming back for more. That's UBNradio.com.
All right. Welcome to the very first official Richard Listens show with Dr. Richard Oelberger. I am the producer and host of the show, Peter Soby, but the man of the hour, Dr. Richard Oelberger. So, because I know you, I'll call you Richard, even though we all know you have a PhD.
Thank you, Peter.
Where'd you get your PhD, Richard?
I achieved it from the Sabre Graduate School in San Francisco.
Very nice.
About a decade ago, actually.
Wow, so you've been practicing about 12 years now?
About 12 years. Actually, no longer a novice.
Wow.
Some may say.
Quite amazing. And now, after your 12-year journey, you have decided to share your knowledge.
I have. I'm excited. I'm excited to be doing this radio show and bringing on guests who I'm passionate about their work and to have discussions where we talk about ways to help people in a greater and bigger way.
That's great. And you know, one thing that really attracted me to you and your show here is the fact that the bottom line is giving information and helping people.
That's right. What good are we if we're not revealing what it is that we have inside of us? And I'm just amazed at people that are coming to me now that I've committed to do this. More and more people are coming out doing amazing work in so many different capacities.
It's very exciting stuff. Now, before we get into today's topic, today's show, all of that, it's our first show. We're going to be here at UBN Radio TV for at least 12 episodes, which are going to be spanned over 24 weeks because we're every other Monday night at 8 p.m. Pacific time. And that's pretty exciting in and of itself. We're really happy to be a part of the UBN TV radio family now. And we have a wide variety of guests that we're going to have over the first 12 episodes of the show. That's what I'll call them. I'll call them the first 12 episodes because there will be many, 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 many more after that. But since this is the first official episode, just tell folks out there a little bit about yourself. Like now we, practicing 12 years, we know where you got your PhD, blah, blah, blah. But what are some of your focuses and what makes you the psychologist that you are? Because you kind of have a special thing with a mix of three things.
That's right. Well, I've tried to bring in to my practice the things that I love doing, the things that I'm passionate about. So currently, and I've had wonderful teachers and training along the way, both in sports and in martial arts, which you were kind enough to highlight on the bio, and working with athletes, and most recently in doing something called Somatic Experiencing, which as a psychologist, we get so much into thinking and the mind, and took me a little bit of while in post-PhD to realize that it's getting into the body where some of the truth lies. So I'm really excited and have found the greatest development within myself and with working with people with kind of getting into where they're stuck along the way. They could be so strong in so many ways, but have areas that need to be delved into so that they can continue to grow and reach their potential. And I think people are thankful to finally find out what that one thing holding them back might be.
And you mentioned somatic experiencing. I know a little bit about it just because I know you, but what the heck is somatic experiencing? I have no idea some of the people out there.
Yes, even people in the psychology field, usually I get a big question mark because it seems like it's an incomplete sentence, somatic experiencing what?
Right.
In relation, so it's a biology-based psychology started by someone named Peter Levine, and many of his students have since broken off, but pretty much getting back into the nature of us as human beings and some of our physiological reactions to things. So we may have the way we wish we could respond, the way we want to respond, our goals, our intents, and yet things get stored in the body depending on early life experiences or interpretations of events. So, and people had recommended this to me, 2, 4, 5, 10 times. And I finally realized that there are some things that just talking about or even empathy aren't enough to unlock.
So it's really delving into the past a lot.
It's delving into the past. Well, it's helping people go inside because the past exists in the present in the body.
Wow, that's heavy.
Yeah. So
Seriously.
it really is. And so sometimes people don't want to come in and get into a deep trauma. So people will say, well, if I'm not a Vietnam vet or if I wasn't a survivor of abuse, can you help me? Well, the truth is, right, that even positive experiences still, we remember when people were cheering for us, as we're here on the topic of sports today, cheering the first basket, the first touchdown, what was happening around us, how it made us feel, what was the response when we got home maybe, or amongst our friends, peers in grade school or in high school later on. So those experiences are vital as well and can be crucial, especially if something happens that disrupts that, that maybe challenges that belief system.
Wow, that's really amazing.
So if you grew up on a really winning team and all of a sudden, there was loss and adversity, that may be really difficult for people to process because they don't know how to go through it.
And speaking of sports, I mean, that's one of your areas of expertise, right? Like sports psychology. That's really something you're focusing more and more on?
It is, and it's part of the reason I wanted the Distillery to be here with me tonight. But it is.
A little sneak peek there of our guests.
Yes, it's no mystery why we choose the people to work with us and to have the discussions that we're having to help us grow professionally. But yeah, I'm being fascinated from everything from looking back at my own development in sports and what it's given me and how it propels me forward to want to work with teens and adults, and just seeing the ways in which, the meaning that it gives to my own life, my own family's life, to culture, a global culture as I've gotten older and become more aware of and traveled the world and seen people, in the World Cup and what the universal language can be amongst people who speak even different languages and come from very different upbringings, poor, rich, in all kinds of economies and strife. Sports can be a really amazing common thread and a developmental thread for children through adolescence.
Right. And now, before we segue into introducing our guests, I just want to make sure that everyone out there knows this is a live streaming show. So those of you who are watching it live right now, we do accept callers. It doesn't mean necessarily that we'll be able to take your call, but we do accept them. And Jarvis, I think you have a picture there in the files. Yep, there is our call-in number. So if you feel so inclined, you hear something that you want to contribute to the conversation, the call-in number is area code 323-284. I don't have my glasses on. 7826. 323 284 7826. I should wear my glasses. So if you feel inclined to call, give us a call, and the phone might ring a long time, and when we pick up the phone, it's not going to be someone saying hello. You're just going to hear the radio show and listen close because we might choose to incorporate you into the show at that point. So that being said, Richard, I volley it over to you. How would you like to introduce today's very special guests?
Well, thank you. I'm very fortunate to have gotten to know both the ladies before me, who are both dear friends and entrepreneurs, momtrepreneurs, if they'll allow me to call them that, and who share a similar passion for sports and for helping athletes. And they have come together to form, this is their second company, I believe, both Absolute Certainty, which I'm sure they'll mention a little bit about, and the Distillery. And since they've brought me in to talk about the Distillery and the concept of repurposing athletes, that keeps kind of replaying in my head, and I hope they'll talk about it. So this idea of what do athletes do I don't want to take away their description, but what do athletes do when they're in a transition? What happens?
Yeah.
And I'm working with human beings in transition. So what a better combination. So
Without further ado,
yes, please let them tell it better than me.
so yes, we would like to welcome to the show Wendy and Eira.
Yeah.
So that was a great long introduction by Richard. So,
A very good one. Thank
take
you.
it
Yes,
as
we
flattery for sure.
Complete.
But to start off with, why don't you guys go ahead and talk a little bit about the company and what you do and who you are?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us on your inaugural show. It's very, very exciting, and we're very happy for you both. We wish you very
Thank you.
much success
Thank you
with
so
it.
much. Thank you for being here.
So the Distillery really is an evolution or an extension of another business that Eira and I are partners in called Absolute Certainty, which is a business and marketing strategy company that for many years has helped companies a little bit repurpose what they're doing. Many times our clients want to move into an area they haven't been in before, or they want to reach a different audience, and we've been able to come in and help them do that. And one day, Eira and I were talking, not just one day, but we talk often about our total passion for sports. And Eira mentioned her passion for an athlete's journey beyond the playing field. I'm going to let you take it from there.
Absolutely. And so that's, touching on what you mentioned earlier, Richard, it's really the at the core of what we do is helping athletes distill and repurpose their unique, innate athletic intelligence. So much of the time when we're talking about a variety of resources for athletes, they have a few different options. They have people who want to come to them and say, hey, so maybe you can move into this realm, or maybe you can sort of follow suit and look at what so-and-so might have done. What we really try and do is put that onus back on to the athlete and explain to him or her that they have this very unique athletic intelligence. That's not going to dissipate, and they know what that is in terms of their specific sport. They've utilized that athletic intelligence, they've applied it, they've developed it, they've honed it. For their entire career. But now as they're approaching looking beyond the life of sports, what does that mean? Where does that go? And so what Wendy and I have done is taken our experience, our professional experience, which is again rooted not just in our partnership at Absolute Certainty, but also in my professional experience of 18 years in business management for the entertainment industry, and helping people look at what they're going to do next. And so we sit with athletes, oftentimes colleges, universities, professional leagues, team owners, and we have a couple of different options, both workshops that we can present to groups of athletes or one-on-one strategizing work with individual athletes.
How did you guys come up with the name The Distillery?
Well, I think Eira said it. We really are looking to distill what that person's unique attributes are and repurpose it into what they can do in the future. So, for example, many athletes have very similar qualities, which we will talk about. But for example, if somebody really has a passion for food or apparel or speaking in public or whatever it is, it's trying to pull that out of them so that they can see what their path beyond athletics is. Because a lot of times, and it's true not just for athletes, but we don't know what we want to do, throughout our lives.
Yeah.
And it's a kind of a best practice that you have when you're a consultant to help companies go through that distilling process when they have a challenge. And that's what we're trying to bring to individual athletes one-on-one, as well as being able to awaken groups of athletes, say at a university, to have that vision that they can take their innate skills and distill it into something else.
That's amazing. And Richard, I know that you have some questions for the ladies, but first, Jarvis, we have a card there I want to put up on screen that says, how does the Distillery do this? So if you can get that one going. And Wendy and Eira, this one, it's part of a kind of a presentation packet you guys have. And
Right.
this is one of the cards that I focus on because I thought it was really interesting because you talk about these 4 phases and kind of use sports analogies with them. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
So as a consultant, you often go through a similar pattern of working with a client. So we just took that kind of best practice and applied it to sports. So for example, when you first
You can take it down now, Jarvis. Thanks. Sorry,
I'm
Wendy,
much
go ahead.
prettier. I'm much prettier.
Yes.
So, when you start with a client, you go through what's called a discovery phase, and that is the equivalent of your the scouting aspect of athletics. Then you want to go on to analysis. So once you've kind of pulled out the information from a client, then you have to analyze that, and that's kind of like training camp. And then what a consultant does is they take all of that information and all that analysis that they have pulled out of their client, and they've compared it and they've looked at what's going on in the market to help solve their problem. And then you build a strategy. And that's really what a playbook is basically a strategy. And then finally, it comes down to execution. And when we work with clients, we can help them execute, or they can take it and execute themselves. But at the end of the day, that's their game day. And so for us, it was just a natural transition from what we were already doing to giving an athlete that kind of analogy from which to work from.
Right. That's really fascinating. And now let's kind of take it to, you guys aren't psychologists. So how does what you do fit in with what Richard does?
Well, as Wendy and I started to do our work and we're meeting with clients, we're meeting with different organizations, we realized that so much of what we bring to the table is valuable, but we need a bit more. And part of that was that we were meeting individuals who had something that we couldn't address, whether these were organic chemistry issues, where they were chemical imbalances, where they were addiction issues that we're just not trained to address in any format. So she and I were talking about how great it would be, as we are actively building our network, which we are. We have an incredible network of resources and individuals and companies that we work with as we do our work. We wanted to bring in a sports psychologist who could address some of these issues that we are just ill-equipped to respond to in any way that would be productive to our clients.
And you just happen to know somebody.
And we happen to know Richard.
Who's an excellent sports psychologist.
Thank you.
So, and Richard kind of addressed that, like how you fit into the mix with working with someone like the Distillery doing sports psychology.
Well, the challenge becomes in sitting with people and really getting close is that sometimes we become a little disconnected and we don't outreach to the places. There's so many people right now needing help. There's so many teams, like Eira started to mention, leagues. There really is no limit to who we can help and in what capacity. It can be one-on-one, and it can be groups, and it can be lectures. So in realizing my own limitation, the more I'm with people one-on-one, the less I'm out there making those contacts and following up. So knowing that the Distillery is out there, that is, pushing each other to make those difficult calls, to reach people in places of influence, the greater compliment we can be to one another.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's like, it's such a great match to have a company like you guys, a sports psychologist like yourself out there. Now, do you guys, I kind of take this question to both of you. Do you have a situation where an athlete just calls you up, walks in the door?
Well, I would say probably more Richard than us.
Yeah, it's been happening a lot more lately, hopefully thanks to UBN Radio and this show.
Yes. How about it?
Even though this is the first official show, we did have a couple of dry runs, and people are reaching out. They are noticing, and it doesn't always come in the form, it can be athletic, but it can be people requesting performance or anxiety issue. They then may see the fact that I have the slant towards sports and be comfortable bringing out how that anxiety and performance is then showing up. Sometimes it's a parent calling in. A lot of calls are about parents and teens, and perhaps they're seeing the one area where they are succeeding is in sports, and then when something goes wrong, that's when they want the help. So I've been really fascinated by that aspect because it brings in so many things. It brings in the family issue. It brings out anxiety, the pressure on young athletes today to succeed and compete at a very high level, and to lose part of what we love about sports when we talk about, which is the fun and the thing that gets us like really excited, right, to do it repeatedly over and over and to pursue to higher lengths. So, and there's athletes in a variety of different professions. Some taking it as a hobby or semi-pro that are reaching out, and they want to talk about where they're stuck. Unfortunately, sometimes they're not willing to reach out, and so you're getting the call from a coach or somebody who's noticing it. And those are the fortunate ones who have people looking out for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I?
No, go ahead.
Yeah,
We both wanted to jump in there.
Please,
Go ahead.
please.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I think it's great that you've touched upon an important point, which Wendy and I discuss all the time, that so much of the time, by the time someone comes to you for help, they're already in trouble. So how great, at least for Wendy and me, when we think about what we want to be able to offer high school, college athletes, is that they can start thinking about these things before they're even in any type of, distress. And it's only natural that athletes become single-minded when focused on their sport. But it's not just the athletes, it's everyone around them, the coaches, the trainers, their families. They are single-mindedly focused on one goal. So again, so much of the time they don't know to reach out for help until it's a little too late, until someone's in trouble.
And I was going to add, one of the things we have discovered along the way, unfortunately, is the area that we're talking about is hugely under-recognized as an issue in the world of athletics at every level. And so we're seeing that it isn't that people feel like they need to call up, they just don't know. And so when we've been talking to universities, they know there's a problem, but it's not something that they're identifying. A lot of times it's, well, if we have great career outreach, or if we provide our students with somebody who can come in and talk about finances, that solves the problem. But the reality is it's not just those items individually that's going to help an athlete if they, say, don't make it into the pros and college is the end of their career, or say they have a career-ending injury. So I think the area that we're all talking about is just becoming something that people are going, wow, it really is a big problem, and we need to do something about it.
Yeah, because sports psychology has been around a long time, but this is a relatively new thing as far as planning for your future, because a lot of athletes probably just think, hey, listen, I got to focus on my sport right now. I'll worry about what I do when I retire, when my career's over. But a lot of times that's way too late, you said.
Well, and, the athletes that are the most successful are the ones that are thinking about it sooner rather than later, as is evidenced by Kobe Bryant, for example.
Right. Jarvis, can you bring up that Kobe Bryant card on there? We have a quote that we'll share with you here. Can go ahead about that?
Well, we were very excited to hear Kobe in his retirement speech talk about how he was so fortunate to have had guidance early in his career that allowed him to consider and plan about what he was going to do afterwards, to find what he loved, to recognize that he was going to have a career beyond
That's good,
sports.
Jarvis.
Because, again, I'm prettier. No.
Totally.
He was going to have a career. That when he ended his career, if he was lucky, it was going to be when he was 40. And as we all know, many of us work until we're well into our 60s, 70s,
Right.
80s. So I think that the most successful athletes are the ones that start thinking about it sooner.
Yes. And now we're going to take a short break. We're not going away, but it's time for a new feature on the Richard Listens show. This one is called the Richard Listens List of 3. How exciting. And look at that. We have a card up there, a list of 3. Basically, this is going to be a feature that we do every show that will be kind of like a list of 3 things that are, maybe in the world of psychology, in the world of sports psychology, something like that Richard can share some knowledge and information for people. So the list that I pose to you today, Dr. Richard Oelberger, is, let's say you're at a sporting event, a professional baseball game, a soccer game, even if it's not professional, and you're there with your family and your kids, and you have some belligerent fans next to you, behind you, in front of you, that are really acting inappropriately. Let's have a list of 3 ways to cope with that situation.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I'm getting a visceral reaction to the last time I was at I won't call out the team. Don't want anyone to think I'm my allegiances will come over time. But yes, it's quite often experience as a family or as a parent to be at a game. And nowadays, tailgating is at a level that I don't even fully have the training or experience of. And I love that people come together around sports and gather and make fabulous, bratwurst and dogs and even brisket. We'll give a shout out.
Brisket shout out.
Brisket shout out.
Those who know will
Anyway,
know.
Yes,
It's
it's
exact,
true.
it's Reed.
Hey, I might show up for the brisket, but it's happening. Drinking is happening. People are loading up and really drinking before they even get to the game. And so the list of three, without further ado, and not necessarily in this order, and according with understanding about somatic experience. First thing is, is there a boundary? Can it be safe? You may have to test that boundary as somebody who's feeling uncomfortable. Is it fun? Is it playful? Are they just yelling at that reliever or the umpire? Or is it a place where you're starting to sense a little bit of anxiety, like maybe it's not the best place to be, and maybe it could be threatening, it could escalate, or there could be a conflict. So that's number one, is create the boundary. The second is self-protection. So if you need to create space, if that is not a safe environment for you or your children, it's okay to move to a seat a little bit further over, or temporarily take a walk, take the kids to get an ice cream or a snack. See if removing yourself from the situation might allow some other people to handle it. There's no reason to walk in a harm's way. But along with that is this may decrease your fear and anxiety of what's going on, right? Someone may be tense over a bad call, or someone, taking the lead in a game, lead change, and or losing money on a game. Who knows? So create some space, emphasize self-protection. And the last part of that, creating space, is supports. Do they have a fan appreciation or an usher? Usually there's somebody, and maybe in a discreet way, without, completely calling out the disorderly group or individual. You can let them know that you're not feeling comfortable. And most teams in major arenas are there to protect that and want to keep the family environment. So utilize your supports, whatever they may be. And lastly, debrief. This is a great...
Ooh, that's a fourth.
Well, supports
But
is
I like
part of
it.
creating space. But
Okay.
hey, we go for it. But debriefing, is very important, whether it's with your friends or your kids. What did you just experience? What did you hear? Explaining to them about behavior, because they may not understand this. Why is someone screaming or cursing? And listen, sports are filled with society. You may get people, Eira mentioned chemical imbalance earlier. You have all kinds of people that sports mean things to them, and that may be their identity. Especially, day games in baseball. You can get cheaper tickets maybe. I mean, there are people who are really passionate and make it really exciting, and dance at the Clippers games. And, I mean, they really, can bring an energy to it, but also at times can get really out of control. And so explaining to your kids, about both the positive side of fandom and, unfortunately, the ability of other people that, to get out of control. And that may even use language. Some people really just, unfortunately, they're not aware of what the language means or how it makes other people feel.
That was a super great and informative list of three, Richard.
Or
Nice
four.
job.
I mean, seriously.
Or four. Three.
No,
three,
no,
four,
it's
five.
really great
3.5.
because I mean, a lot of people would maybe just see a situation like that and their go-to is confrontation.
I've seen that happen. And it's scary when somebody else goes after somebody who's being rowdy and out of control.
Right.
You feel even less
part of
safe.
that initial boundary may be testing it. Maybe it's not at a level where they're even aware, and maybe they are approachable. So, and sometimes you'll quickly find out, right, that they have no regard for your space or that there's children present, and that would be a good sign.
And like you said, it opens up the opportunity for dialogue. Again, sports is such a massive and far-reaching platform, and it allows us to both enjoy the very best attributes of the game and the very best attributes that we as either athletes or fans bring to the table, or the very worst in us. And so at least it provides you an opportunity to explain, if you've got kids present, there are different, experiences we're going to take away from this game day.
And a lot of, teams maybe, there's been some incidents, particularly in Los Angeles in the last few years, where there was fan violence, and there's been fan violence even in teens, and more competitive sports takes over. Yeah. I think it's also pushed the team culture, the owner culture, to establish more, how do we encourage sportsmanship, right?
Yeah.
What is the, I know a lot of the youth soccer organizations, it's all about parents too. There's a code of conduct.
Absolutely.
Now, a lot of people can give lip service to it, but it helps every once in a while if people are reminded. I know at Dodger games, they'll flash up there, kind of, what are the appropriate, and it helps to hold that space for, hey, what are we here for? This is a sport. This is a diversion from the stresses of life. This is a release. This is excitement. This is a chance to come out and be passionate about team you've loved and your family loved and your father loved and your grandfather loved, hopefully, or whoever you want to share that with.
Sure.
And hopefully that reminder kind of, sometimes people just need, that kind of check. Hey, you're getting a little out of control, and they can be redirected. And worst comes to worst, there's been an increased, law enforcement presence. If you have to protect yourself by asking for help,
absolutely,
that's okay. This is your space and your freedom to enjoy.
And I do love that you both brought up that you can turn it into a teaching thing for the youngsters and stuff. That's great. So as an extension now, not an extension, but as a wonderful segue from our Richard Listens list of 3, I want to turn it back here to Wendy and Eira. They have something they call their 5 tips for success. And I suppose that this is something that obviously you're focusing on sports, but I think from any walk of life, we'll probably get a lot out of this.
We think so.
Thank you. Yeah. But, one of the things that we really are trying to say to athletes is that you have innate skills, this athletic intelligence, which sometimes is measured, quantitatively, physically, but actually athletes do amazing things that mere mortals like ourselves don't do. And these 5 tips are really trying to focus on those things that athletes really can take into their next career, because it's a natural talent. And there are people in the world who pay lots of money and get training to actually have some of these abilities. So what we're trying to do is highlight some of the ones that we think are the most important.
And we cover them in depth through our workshops, and also our one-on-one work with clients.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
And so maybe when you read these off, Wendy, too, look directly into your camera for like the best absolute framing and look for these 5 tips
So I'll
for
ignore
success.
you and I'll look at the camera.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's my one tip of success for you is when you give your tips of
What are
success,
Peter's 5 tips of success?
look in the camera,
right, here we
speak into the
go.
microphone.
I'm looking at you. Ready? Okay. First of all, athletes are elite athletes because they have a huge desire, and it all starts with desire. And so our first tip is to really ignite your desire again for whatever it is that you're planning on doing in the future. Because if you have that same level of passion for sports that you do for your next career, it's really going to take you as far as it did in sports. Our second tip is to get uncomfortable. Now, athletes are so known for getting uncomfortable. My favorite wide receivers over the course of my life are gymnasts who will reach far up into space to grab the most incredibly difficult pass, knowing that they're going to get completely laid on their back and it'll probably hurt really bad. And yet they're willing to do that. If you can keep that level of discomfort in your career beyond your sports, you will be incredibly successful. Pause often. Now, what does pause mean? Pause in sports is connecting back to your objectives as an athlete, and it's taught to you as you're coming up through sports, and that pause gives you that moment to reset. And so often in the world outside of sports, people don't know how to do it. They just jump in, and athletes have that innate ability, so use it often. It will be something that will really set you apart from your peers and from other people that in that industry. Embrace your failures. Now, everybody here knows I use this example. If you're batting 400, that still means you're failing 60% of the time. And athletes are incredible at taking failures and learning from it and excelling because of that. So when you go out into your career beyond sports, please fail, because it will make you better at what you do. And then finally, athletes seem to have this insane gut instinct. Now, many of us have it, but athletes seem to have it on a certain level that we don't all share. So how does a running back see how to get through players that are falling all over them? Or how does the quarterback know how to pass it down the field and make sure that his wide receiver is going to be there? Please take this really amazing skill that you've honed through your athletic career and use it, because your gut often is going to be the thing that helps you excel. And because you can hear it better than the rest of us, it gives you a competitive advantage. And those are our 5 tips. Thank you very much.
All right. Those were great. Richard, thoughts
Awesome.
about the Distillery's 5 tips for success?
Wow. Well, I just got all kinds of excited when I
I can see it. I can see
I
you're
was like-
very excited.
well, I just
I wasn't looking at you, though. I was looking at the camera.
I was
so didn't
watching
see
Richard.
you.
I saw him bubbling over.
well, I don't know why I got excited when you talked about learning how to fail, and I was like,
Yeah.
somehow that, right? So, but that's really what's embracing, right? Not about failure, but transition, right? Learning how to get excited about it. I just thought about telling an athlete, right? We don't even think about that, right? I was just thinking about a baseball player. He walks, he strikes out, and he kind of looks up, and he's kind of walking through.
Sure.
What was the pitch sequence? Where was that one? How did he get me this time?
Yeah.
And they're, amazing. If every time they struck out,
Can
Right.
you imagine if you were in your job every day and you failed as much? I mean, I'd be a ball of jelly on the floor. I would be devastated by that. And athletes they understand it's part of the process. And
well,
that's
the
such
truth
an advantage.
The truth is, I do, and we do as therapists, psychologists, business people, we do fail, and it's less quantifiable, right? And there may not be as many people
or
watching,
stats.
Sure.
Or stats.
but I
too.
think
Yeah.
they did a study actually on people that left. They did like a survey of people that felt that their psychologist was actually listening to them
Right.
when they left the room, and the results were really like when you compared what the psychologist said to what the patient. Not necessarily. They didn't necessarily feel they were heard. They didn't necessarily feel like someone really helped them get into that fear. Maybe because they're afraid of getting into their own vulnerability.
Sure.
Maybe something that comes up triggers too much. And so it's safer sometimes not to get into the fear, right? It's a little bit safer to stay, so there's this kind of testing out process, whether it be, somebody with a major trauma or an athlete,
Sure.
right? Will they let you take them there?
Yeah.
And will they tell you what really, right? I remember, recently hearing they did an ESPN on Bo Jackson, this phenomenal, athlete, one of the best I ever witnessed growing up, and the best on Tecmo Bowl for all you video game lovers out there. Make a pitch for Nintendo. I think it's coming back out soon. But they were looking at his childhood, and he was not very verbal, and he was bullied and picked on
Sure.
and thrown apples at him. So how
Wow.
he got strong, I don't want to oversimplify his story, was from he would throw the apples until everybody went home.
Yeah.
And he would have had one of those powerful arms that anyone ever saw as a natural athlete, both in football, baseball, and I think it was also, I don't know what level, in track and field. But
Right.
But this idea that, through adversity, through those failures, through the learning about yourself, you're growing and becoming better.
And go ahead. Do you
No, I
guys?
was going to say, a lot of times athletes don't even realize that they have those innate abilities. It's so normal and natural, and maybe sometimes even harder than we think. We look at it like it's so easy, but
They don't know how to
That's-
translate it beyond
yeah.
their sport.
and
Well,
that's what we want to
why-
repurpose it.
Yeah. When I heard you say distill, I was like, how is this different from instilling, right? Instilling is like we're putting it in, we're teaching them from the beginning. Distilling implies it's already inside.
Absolutely.
and maybe they're aware of it, maybe they're not. They just do. Maybe they've always been amazing, or maybe it was something like I just made a story of adversity in which they overcame external odds, but they may not be able to translate, right?
Yes,
How do I
exactly.
identify it? How do I experience it and then identify it? And sometimes we need people who can.
And how do I repurpose it? How do I take that skill and say, I want to, it doesn't matter what you want to do. I want to sell cars. I want to be a chef. I want to be an entrepreneur. It doesn't matter, whatever it is that you want to do. How do you take that and use it to your competitive advantage in the world? And I just don't think there are enough athletes out there really thinking about it. And it has to come from within. You can have the best business managers and the best agents and all of that. But at the end of the day, your career as an athlete is going to be over. Every great athlete has had their time. And we want to extend the fulfillment of an athlete's life beyond those playing years, mainly because we're very passionate and love sports so much and appreciate the amazing gift that we get as spectators and fans of the game. And we really, want to translate that back and give it back to the athletes.
And a lot of what all three of you are talking about is really great advice that we can seg into our next feature, another feature that we will have on the show every other week. And Jarvis, there's a card for this, and you got it ready to go. This feature is called Richard Listens. So on this feature, Richard will be listening to me, Peter, and I'm going to kind of present a hypothetical situation, like perhaps a client. And we've only got about 5 minutes for this, so there's only so much that we can all get into on it, but I think it'll be kind of fun to hear what kind of advice you would give. So for today's feature of Richard Listens, listen to this, Richard. My name is Johnny Rocket, and I was a high school star, and I played for University of Texas.
Woohoo.
And I was third runner-up for the Heisman Award, and I was definitely a blue-chip top 10 consensus NFL draft pick. And a week before the NFL Combines, I blew out my knee, MCL, ACL, and basically they said my career is over. And I'm pissed off. My career never started. I didn't even get to cash in my big check. I didn't even get drafted. I didn't have a plan B. So I come into you. What do I do, Dr. Richard?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Johnny, I do love your burgers. But,
That's right. I got a burger, Johnny Rocket.
But in all seriousness, I mean, in the briefest window that we have, pretty much, somatic experiencing lens takes a look at, it says a healthy nervous system basically needs to flow between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. What does that mean? So the identity is formed into like parts of us that are calm and relaxed and in sync with who we are, right? I'm an athlete, I'm an achiever, I'm going places, I'm strong. And then part of us which may be, dissonant. So I don't want to see myself injured, hurt, incapable, weak. So, my goal with Johnny or any athlete who's going through something of that grave magnitude, number one is, to understand that when the system goes from this place of such a traumatic kind of experience to get that injury, that they're going to collapse. Emotionally, they may go through a period of emotionally collapse, depression, shutdown, fear. And so part of what I want to do when someone comes to me in collapse is join with them in that place. Because at that moment, they're going to be probably going through a lot of anxiety comes up when it has to do with confronting who am I, how am I changing, what will be for me. So I want to both kind of disarm some of that resistance and anger that you mentioned, that anger that comes up from joining with them. I want to have tremendous empathy for what that's like and to kind of walk them through, right? What was the vision that you were on the precipice of? What did you see when you're up there and you're being called names for Heisman, even if you didn't win? I'm sure there was quite a vision, a lot of investment emotionally in what was going to happen next and what did you perceive. So it's important not to bring it up just to upset them some more, but to get a real understanding of how much pain there is there. And from that place, I want to get an identity about their capacity. What are their strengths? What are their dreams? What are their visions? What are all the things that made them who they are? And I want to build up that capacity and tie into that vision, because from that vision, there's a vision of somebody who's achieving, pursuing, you want to type into those innate strengths like they're talking about at the distillery and get the person identified for themselves. If they can notice that in their own body and their own vision, right? What did they feel like when they were throwing the 50-yard pass, hurdling over defenders? What was that like for them? What did they feel like? Nobody can capture that. We know what the experience is for us and the excitement as a fan or as a coach, but we don't know what it was like for them and what meaning that brought to their life.
Wow, as Johnny Rocket, I wanted to be really pissed off at you, Dr. Richard. But you really put my mind at ease a little bit. I think, I don't know how you'll be able to empathize with my situation, but I felt some empathy there.
Well, it's a good point. There may be resistance, and there is going to be a little bit of testing of who are you and why do I want you here, and you were not me, and you don't know. You don't understand, especially if there's people counting on those finances or perception of finances or responsibility that went along with that achievement. So there has to be a trust-building process. So some of that, but the real trust is in showing them that they have the capacity to go into the pain and come back into the strengths. And it's not a simple process. I don't want to make it sound like it's an easy overnight. It's a constant flowing, and there's going to be times when you're rehabbing or whatever you're doing or even moving towards your next career, and there's a stumbling block, and it brings back up that failure. So it's a continual flow between going into the pain and bringing back towards the vision and trying to eliminate those periods of time where they're sinking or going back into a collapse and moving back towards their new identity of themselves, helping them to build that.
Right. Now, Eira and Wendy, we only got a couple of minutes, and we have a little bit of darkness. One of our lights kind of went out, but we could still see you.
We brought our own light.
Yes.
We're just fine.
You
not
do
worried.
have your own light. Now, as Johnny Rocket, I kind of got my head on a little bit straighter with Dr. Richard. Thank you very much. And now he sent me over to you at the distillery.
Sure.
Like, what do you tell someone like me? I mean, I'm not even a college graduate, and now my career is gone.
Well, I think that Richard, first of all, did a great job with the disarming technique, which we are big fans of, and and we would follow up with redirecting a bit. So, all along when you were a little kid, when you were in elementary school and junior high and high school and then college, what were some of the things you did to recharge that weren't just about your unique sport?
I played football, but no, you said not about my unique sport, right?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Because what we find more often than not is that there is something, whether it was I need to jump in the kitchen with grandma and bake cookies, or I want to jump, Richard mentioned the Nintendo earlier. There's some, video games. There's always something that athletes rely on to distract, to recharge. And so we like to sort of redirect and start to talk about that. That sort of is the jumping platform. Inevitably, we're going to get back to the sport, and we're going to get back to your career and what you did or didn't do. But we want to spend some time talking about your passion.
Yeah, and in finding out what your passions are, you might find the spark of what you can do next, and that's the point. And when when you're talking to somebody about what those other interests are, you'd be surprised how you can reshape it. So, for example, Johnny, do you like to talk in front of a camera? Did you love it when you were on camera and the reporter was coming up to you afterwards and saying how awesome was the game and doing the interview?
Yeah, it fed my ego. I loved it.
Awesome. And you're a good communicator because I've actually seen you. I'm a big fan, by the way. I'm so sorry about your injury.
Right.
So you know how to communicate in front of people. So let's work on that. Let's work on what we can do to take that skill that you're clearly equally as good at and repurpose all of the things that you learned as an athlete and get you to be, it doesn't have to be a presenter. It could be, you could be a motivational speaker. If you like to motivate people, there's many things, and it's not about career development. It's really teasing out from the person what it is that ignites their flame. because when you find that beyond sports, then you can really put them in a place where they can excel as they did in sports.
And when you've got that passion and that drive clearly identified, then you can create a very specific strategy, a game plan. And you'll see that everything you say and do from that point on ties you back to your game plan.
I like it. And time flies.
It does
So,
indeed.
Jarvis, you have can you put the card up like Eira and Wendy? Thank you for being our guests, and we have a card here with some contact information. But can you tell people how to reach you?
Absolutely. You can visit our website, www.thedistilleryinc.com, and our emails, phone numbers are on the website.
Amazing.
Thank you so
And-
much for having us.
So happy to be here. Thank you again, guys.
Yes, and then we have a card here on how to reach Dr. Richard here that we will put up. And basically you can go to, well, let me have you say it, Richard. This is your information there.
You can go to RichardListens.com or email me at richard@richardlistens.com and Facebook.com, Richard Listens.
Great. And of course, and myself, Peter, you can reach me through Twitter at Peter Soby or Instagram at Donut Spirit. And that's it for our first debut show. So, Richard, you want to thank your guests, and then we'll say goodbye.
Thank you, Wendy and Eira. It was so much fun.
Thank you.
So we will be back in 2 weeks on August 15th, 2016, 8 p.m. here at the UBN Radio TV studios. And our guest is going to be...
Our guest is going to be Jeff Liss, who is organizer and coach for the Special Maccabees.
Amazing.
Yes.
I can't wait to hear all about
So
that.
stay tuned on Richard Listens Facebook to get more information about him and what we'll be talking about.
Sounds good. Well, congratulations on your debut show, Dr. Richards, and thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Thank you, Peter.
And we'll see you all in 2 weeks.
In the future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.